Useless trash, my mother-in-law said, hurling my baby off the cliff. Not a Hastings Heir. I dialed 911 helpless. The next morning the headlines read, "The chill air, a sure sign autumn's reign was ending," blew through Brookline's streets. I was in my Georgian mansion, located in this affluent Boston suburb, and I was completely focused on the final steps of making a necklace by hand. I was carefully putting together freshwater pearls and rose quartz with my nimble fingers. You could tell from how I worked that I took real pride in my craft, and that I was also an artist at heart. Just as I was nearly finished, I whispered those words, and then the doorbell chimed. It was my mother-in-law again, of course. I immediately stiffened up. Marian Hastings' visits had become a common thing, happening maybe twice or 3 times a week. Each time she'd move my furniture around, ignore the instructions I had for the staff, and slowly, over time, start taking over more and more of my personal space. Just as I thought, the maid let Marian into the house, and she was wearing a Chanel tweed suit with her Hermes scarf around her neck. You could see, just from the way she stood, that she felt superior because she was from an old Boston family. "Catherine, I have some important things to talk about today." Marian settled herself down gracefully, setting her expensive handbag on a chair near the fireplace. I quickly started to put away all my jewelry-making equipment. "Oh, don't worry about those little handmade creations. This is about the charity event at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum." When she said handmade creations, I smiled on the inside, thinking of Riley. My own business, Treasured Gems, was a well-known shop for handmade jewelry over on Newbury Street. I felt real satisfaction in the work I did. It was a product of the talents and creative instincts I'd cultivated independently, having come from a blue-collar background. My parents operated a little corner store in the Boston outskirts. Despite not being rich, I'd been raised in a home overflowing with love, developing principles that prioritized familial relationships above all else. Those values were being stretched pretty thin in my life right now. "And by the way, when is Alex supposed to be back?" Marian inquired. "I don't know," I replied. "He's been getting home later and later lately." I'd almost become used to the fact that my husband, Alex, wasn't around. He was a senior analyst at a massive Boston investment company. He was a super smart guy with both a Harvard education and an MBA. He seemed like the perfect guy, successful at his job. I still have really clear memories of the night we met about 3 years ago at Lumaison, that fancy restaurant on Newbury Street. I was there celebrating a friend's birthday, and Alex, who had just finished a dinner with some clients, happened to be at the table next to mine. He started chatting with me after he'd noticed the handmade necklace I was wearing. That first night, Alex was fascinated by my sophisticated style and genuine nature, while I was completely charmed by his intelligence and his classic gentlemanly behavior. We got engaged 6 months after we began dating. At the time, Marian told me I'd gotten a wonderful daughter-in-law, but secretly she hated it. It was tough for her, a woman who said she wasn't related to the people on the Mayflower and was a big deal in Boston, to deal with a daughter-in-law from a lower class. 3 years into the marriage, everything seemed calm on the outside, but I was starting to feel more and more worried inside. Trips to see my family happened less and less, and I started to lose touch with my old friends. Alex started coming home much later, and even weekends were spent away, with work being the excuse. The changes in my husband had happened little by little. At first, Alex would come to my shop on special days and seemed interested in what I did, but now he said my work was just a pastime. Marian's influence was always the reason for this change. Alex might have always listened to his mother because he learned to as a kid. Marian took control after her husband, who was a banker, passed away, and she was famous as a socialite who loved doing charity work, but she was actually mean and liked to control things. Her focus on family history and her standing in society resulted in high expectations for her son. I looked outside the window. Gold ginkgo leaves were falling on the road. I felt like my free life was slowly disappearing, just like those leaves, but I had a hidden strength inside. Even though I was a soft and shy person, I could handle unfair situations with determination. That strength was a small glimmer of hope for the challenges that were coming. In the second spring of our marriage, Catherine finally confirmed that she was pregnant after we'd been hopping for it. Tears of happiness streamed down her face as she stared at the positive pregnancy test in the quiet of that morning. Outside, the cherry tree outside our atelier that I loved was covered in a dance of soft pink blossoms. The whole scene felt full of optimism for the new life we were expecting. When Catherine told Alex that evening, when he got home, he showed emotions I'd rarely seen and gave her a hug. "I'm going to be a dad." Those words radiated a warmth I'd never witnessed in his normally reserved behavior. Catherine saw a flash, just for a second, of the kind, loving Alex from our early years. But that joyful moment was soon overshadowed by a feeling that came with Marian's appearance. The next day, Marian showed up earlier than expected, with a costly bouquet of ranunculus. Her fancy Hermes scarf and Chanel tweed outfit perfectly conveyed her status as a prominent figure in Boston. After she said, "Congratulations, Catherine," came words that felt like they would shape what happened next. "It must be a boy, naturally. The Hastings heir. We have to raise the child to be worthy of our family. For prep school, it must be Phillips Academy. Then Harvard. It's just what we do." The little baby growing in Catherine's womb was only a few centimeters long, but its life was already being planned. I was already picturing the iconic buildings along the Charles River and Harvard Yard as the setting for my future child's life. Once I knew I was pregnant, Marian's controlling behavior became even more pronounced. This started with the hospital decision. Massachusetts General Hospital was the only possibility in her mind. She insisted a child in our family deserved the very best medical attention, and that meant the most prestigious private hospital in Boston. Those white buildings represented the legacy of countless generations of Boston Brahmins being born there. Marian also secured a nurse she completely trusted, Lucy Parker. This experienced nurse was a woman in her late 40s who always deferred to Marian. I found something unsettling, a hidden darkness that would occasionally flash in Lucy's eyes. Marian always went with me to my prenatal checkups. My mother-in-law's presence intruded even into the most personal parts of the examination room. It was Marian who got all the information about my health and the baby's development directly from Nurse Lucy. I began to feel like I was fading away, becoming invisible. One day, Marian casually informed me, "I've told your parents they shouldn't visit for a while," as if it was the most normal thing. She was holding an expensive teacup, and the family ring that had been passed down for generations sparkled on her finger. "We don't need any needless stress from people who wouldn't appreciate our family's standing. You understand that's for the baby's benefit, right?" I could only offer a silent nod. My folks, who ran their little market, were thrilled about having their first grandkid. They'd phone every single weekend just to see how the baby was doing. Mom was busy knitting miniature socks, and Dad was building a wooden rocking chair for the little one. Even all these sweet displays of affection eventually seemed to dwindle under Marian's cold stare. Alex started coming home later and later as my pregnancy went on. His presence, encased in expensive suits, seemed to drift further away from me. He'd always say he needed to make more money, especially since the baby was coming, constantly being gone, even on holidays for work. His words of care about my health became less frequent as time passed. I found myself alone more often, feeling the baby move as I stared up at the ceiling. As fall fully arrived, my labor began under the colorful autumn leaves of Boston Common. Alex didn't make it through those 12 tough hours of labor. He was occupied with a critical business deal, he claimed. It was Nurse Lucy who held my hand in the delivery room. "Just a little more," she kept saying. Something about her tone just made me uneasy. The sterile white ceiling, the pungent scent of the cleaner, and the constant beeping of the heart monitor all faded together. Soon after midnight, the baby finally let out a cry. Outside the window, the autumn wind shook the old hospital panes. "It's a girl." When that news broke, I saw Marian's face darken in the waiting area. Her fingers clenched hard onto the collar of her costly suit, almost revealing a surge of fury. But at that very second, Catherine was overwhelmed with pure happiness as I held my baby. It was the small but undeniably present weight of being alive. The partially open eyes looked exactly like mine. "Emma," I murmured. It was my grandmother's name. At that instant, soft moonlight pouring into the hospital room gently lit up the baby's face. Sadly, this blissful moment didn't stick around. 2 days after the birth, Nurse Lucy came to visit the room. Her face seemed to be shrouded by a dark cloud. The sound of her pricey leather shoes creaking across the hospital floor sent a shiver down my spine. "Mrs. Morrison, we have to discuss something." What was then revealed was a total shock. The baby might have some signs that indicate possible developmental issues. I held my child close. I got no specific answers to my question, like what symptoms, just a bunch of ambiguous terms, nothing detailed. There wasn't any presentation of test findings showcasing medical proof. Lucy kept looking over at Marian, who was standing in the corner of the room. Marian, who was there when the news was delivered, let out a sigh that was almost like, "I knew it." Her response was like she had seen this coming. Her hands nervously played with her expensive pearl necklace, giving away her internal distress. The autumn rain fell softly just outside the window, getting heavier by the second. I sat there in that hospital room, and Emma's breathing was calm. Catherine held my little one's small hand, and I knew that difficult times were coming. Back then, though, nobody could have guessed just how serious the situation would get for my sweet daughter. Just 2 weeks after we left the hospital, it happened. It was a morning in early October when Marion suddenly suggested we take a trip to their Berkshire villa. She spoke to me with a surprising softness in the Brookline Mansion's drawing room, the one that was veiled in the morning's fog. Marion said, "Catherine, you need a change of scenery. The mountain air would be perfect for the baby." Her tone was more gentle than I had ever heard her speak. Yet a strange unease gnawed at me deep down. I held Emma, gazing out the window. The leaves, already starting to change colors as autumn set in, moved in the wind like some kind of disturbing warning. Emma just lay still. Halfway through her sentence, I saw a flicker of something odd on Marion's face. But then she quickly plastered on a smile. "Don't worry, I've taken care of everything," she said. It was as though it had already been decided. During the drive to the Berkshires, I was in the back of the fancy SUV holding Emma. Marion, in the front passenger seat, kept giving the driver exact instructions. Meanwhile, Alex, next to them, was fixated on his phone, typing emails for what he called the finalization of a huge business deal. He didn't glance at me. He didn't even look at either of us. After approximately 3 hours of driving, the vehicle slowly climbed a secluded mountain road. Weaved between those breathtaking mountains showcasing their fall foliage, a lavish mountain villa unexpectedly came into view. The grand 3-story structure radiated an air of sophistication, like something you'd see in Europe. This is where the Hastings family spends their summers. It boasts a history spanning over a century. I could detect Marion's strong sense of pride. Upon entering the estate, the high cliff face behind the building was visible. Beyond the deep valley, autumn-hued mountains seemed to go on forever. It was a gorgeous sight, yet the steep drop gave me the creeps. Even after arriving at the villa, Marion kept giving out orders at a rapid pace. She dictated where we'd sleep, when we'd eat, even where we could walk. Everything was decided by her. Catherine never had her views considered. "Emma, it's all right. Mommy will look after you," Catherine said quietly as she calmed Emma in the bedroom. The baby appeared perfectly fine, which contradicted what the hospital said. There was no indication of the developmental problems that Nurse Lucy had suggested. Instead, Emma's eyes were full of wonder, reacting responsively to the sounds and light around her. As evening neared, the villa was soaked in orange sunlight. With the sky perfectly clear, the autumn trees seemed to shimmer in the sunset. In the living room, filled with expensive furniture, Catherine gave Emma a sweet smile. That's when I knew. I'd had enough of the pretending. I flinched at the unexpected yell. When I spun around, I saw Marion staring at me with a furious look, like a big cat ready to pounce. Her costly tweed suit seemed to be lit up in a shade of red from the setting sun. It's just unacceptable to accept a child with a disability into the family. Marion approached, her face twisted as if she were an entirely different individual. There was a madness in her gaze that I had never seen before. Anything that could pollute the Hastings lineage must be eliminated. Immediately, Marion ripped Emma from my grasp. Completely surprised by her move, I stood there for a second, unable to react. My body, still fragile after the birth, was struggling to keep up. "Give Emma back to me, please." My heartbreaking plea rang throughout the enormous hall of the villa. I tripped and landed hard on the costly Persian rug. Meanwhile, Alex just stayed in his leather chair, smoking a cigar. "My mother is right, this is the best thing to do." His voice sounded cold, with no warmth at all. The light-colored cigar smoke drifted in the air as the evening wore on. Marion flung open the glass doors leading to the terrace and marched directly toward the cliff. Fresh air from the fall day streamed into the room. "Farewell, you were never destined to be part of the Hastings." I tried to crawl forward, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. Marion raised her arm. Emma's small form was outlined against the setting sun. "Emma," my scream echoed through the valley below. My cry gradually faded away, echoing repeatedly across the valley. The trees, with their fall hues, danced in the breeze, painting a scene of heartless, yet stunning, evening beauty. The tiny form hurled towards the cliff's base vanished into the orange glow of the setting sun. Marion's side view, holding tightly to the railing on the terrace, made a strange shadow in the fading light. The only thing that moved was the smoke from Alex's cigar, which drifted lazily in the still air. Right after Emma went over the edge, Catherine's hand, shaking uncontrollably, called 911. When trying to tell the operator what had happened, I struggled to get the words out right. "The baby," my mother-in-law tossed the baby off the cliff. "Please, I need help." With my vision blurred by tears, Marion and Alex were already nowhere to be seen. The quiet of the evening was shattered only by the rumble of an expensive car as it sped away. They'd left behind those cold words, "We'll take care of telling the police." The Berkshire County Police and local search teams showed up quickly, with their sirens blaring. The once peaceful villa turned into a frenzy in moments. Jim Collins, the leader of the rescue team, quickly understood the situation and called for a helicopter. Time was of the essence, as autumn days get dark early this time of year. They told me to get the lighting equipment ready. The team needs to be ready. Orders were shouted back and forth. Police put up caution tape around the villa and began their investigation. Catherine, wrapped in a blanket the paramedics had given her, gazed blankly at the bottom of the cliff. "Could you please tell us what happened again, ma'am?" a detective gently asked. Behind him, Gardener Thomas Wilson had already begun giving important information. "I was busy in the greenhouse and I had a clear view through the glass. As darkness fell, I saw the valley lit up by floodlights as the rescue team cautiously made their way down the slope. The helicopter's searchlight scanned the area. My heart and Catherine's pounded with Emma's name in their thoughts. Then near morning the phone rang unexpectedly. It was Marion calling. "Catherine, it's awful," she said, her voice shaking. Was it emotional stress or was she putting on an act? She claimed the baby's fall was accidental. She'd lost her balance. I wanted everyone to believe it was a tragic, unintentional occurrence. News from the local station, breaking news, could be heard on the other end of the call. As the bulletin came on, the announcement was that infantiference infants had been discovered near Berkshire Cliff. Remarkably okay, Marion's tone abruptly shifted. "Yes, it was an accident," she repeated. But the truth was beginning to surface in my mind. Gardener Thomas had seen the entire thing from inside the greenhouse. On top of that, the villa's security cameras had the key moment captured on film. Everything was recorded, including the events on the patio, Alex's detached demeanor as he puffed on a cigar. But then, the miracle arrived with daylight. A local mountain climber who was out on an early morning hike heard a baby crying from within the thick trees. Emma was found about 30 feet down the cliffside, shielded as though by a protective layer of dense undergrowth and young, flexible tree branches. "I'm hearing a baby cry. Right here," the climber said. The rescue team slowly came closer, and Emma was unbelievably safe. My initial thought was that her little form was flawless, as though shielded from harm. The thorough tests at Massachusetts General Hospital revealed no issues whatsoever. In fact, she seemed to be developing faster than most kids her age. It turned out that the claims Nurse Lucy had made about possible developmental problems were completely untrue. Moreover, as the police dug deeper into the case, the full scope of this terrible plot began to emerge. Lucy Parker, overwhelmed by her guilt, finally admitted everything. "Mrs. Hastings actually offered me $500,000 just to create a false diagnosis." My account brought forth even more stunning information. It turns out Alex had a girlfriend, Caroline Winslow, who came from another well-known Boston family. They had already been quietly residing together in a fancy apartment in Back Bay. The whole scheme had been expertly planned out. Marion and Alex devised a perfect plan to force Catherine out of the picture. They would make up the fact that she had delivered a child with disabilities, wear her down psychologically, and eventually make it look like she had killed her baby because of postpartum depression. Alex had even made plans to marry Caroline. Lucy's confession showed a truly horrifying situation. The pristine hallways of the expensive hospital, the fancy villa, the outwardly perfect image. Behind all of that, an unbelievable conspiracy had been festering. I feel terrible about what I did to Mrs. Morrison and her little girl. In the examination room, the autumn sun was pouring in as Lucy's tears flowed while she said she was sorry. Emma, in her mom's arms, was sleeping soundly, completely enveloped by the warm light. I felt like her pure, innocent nature was chasing away all the bad things in this world. Then on that day, the verdict was handed down in the Berkshire County Court, where the sun shone through the tall windows. The court found Marion Hastings guilty of attempted murder. Alex Hastings was found guilty of conspiracy and preventing rescue. Lucy Parker was found guilty of fabricating medical documents. Catherine held Emma close as the judge's pronouncements echoed through the room. My baby, who was only 3 months old, had rosy cheeks. Marion looked like she had lost all her pride, bowing her head. Her expensive suit seemed fake. Alex took his sentence without ever showing anything until it was over. Lucy, because of her guilt, owned up to what she had done, so the judge took that into account. Catherine was given sole custody in the divorce case. Also, I was granted total custody of my little girl. I also received a large settlement, child support payments, and ownership of the Berkshire house where it all happened. I'm so glad it's done. Leaving the courthouse, a strange feeling of lightness filled my chest. When the truth came out, my story started to be talked about a lot. The Boston Globe was the first to write about it, and then it was in the national news. The hashtag Stand with Catherine took off like wildfire all over social media. My shop, Treasured Gems, was overwhelmed with purchases from every state, along with a tidal wave of supportive notes. Her handcrafted jewelry wasn't just adornments anymore. They represented the resilience and self-respect of women. Every item we sold holds a piece of our history. Many people were deeply moved by her comments in an interview. I was able to grow the tiny Newbury Street shop into an online marketplace, processing orders from every corner of the globe. Catherine made the decision to repurpose the Berkshire Villa into a safe haven for moms and kids. That facility, called Emma's Haven, turned into a place where mothers and children could get help when they were facing tough challenges. Where tragedy once existed, a beacon of hope now stood. "Mama, look," was a frequent request. The day Emma learned to walk, her grandparents were there too. The family grocery store had become Emma's happy place. She laughed and giggled, perched in the wooden chair her grandfather made, and wearing the sweater that her grandmother had lovingly created. Real, genuine happiness isn't about your family tree or how wealthy you are. One evening, Catherine and her mom were knitting. That same night, Catherine said quietly while gazing at the sunset through the store's window. New necklaces were placed on the counter. The gemstones all shimmered in the fading sunlight, as if starting a new chapter. Numerous mothers and daughters came to treasured gems that day. I listened, smiling silently to their stories. As the gentle illumination filled the shop, Emma seemed to gleam like a precious stone. I could see the future stretching ahead, bright and definite, along with this tiny being.